Hi everyone, welcome to today's edition of the Batch Working Group. Today is 26th October 2023, and I'm Swati Sehgal. I'm going to be hosting today's meeting. Just before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this meeting is recorded, and please keep in mind the CNCF Code of Conduct. So for today's agenda, we have Aldo. He's going to be talking about highlights of the latest release of Q. So Aldo, you should have co-host if you want to share your screen. Over to you.
Thank you, Swati. Let me try. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Yes. So, as you might have seen our emails yesterday, we released Q0.5. So I wanted to share the highlights of the release, which are plenty this time. Just a quick overview or reminder of what is Q even. So Q is a job queuing system that is based on Kubernetes CRD. So that's why we call it Kubernetes native. And it offers resource quota management. And to do that, you can define a two-level hierarchy, so that you can define some fair sharing and borrowing rules in this hierarchy. It also offers priority-based ordering and preemption. So preemption to recover, borrow quota, or simply because you have a higher priority job and you want to preempt what is already running. Fungibility. Q offers you the options to define some order of how you want to consume different types of resources, which can be like different availability machines, or maybe you want to define fungibility for models like GPUs. So this is all possible. Q was originally written to support specifically the job API, the Kubernetes job API. But since the first release, we have extended it to support quite a few CRDs, notably JobSet, which is also part of this working group. All of Kubeflow. We started with MPI job, but we now have support for all of Kubeflow and RayJob, as well as pod support coming in 0.5. And Q can be extended to support any CRD. We have heard from some users in the Slack channel that they were experimenting with the libraries to support certain CRDs. So this is already happening. So what's new in our latest release from yesterday? By the way, if you have any questions, let me know. I can always answer while I'm presenting. Otherwise, you can ask at the end. So yes, what is new in 0.5? I think our biggest change is what we call admission checks, which is we originally called it like two-stage admission, and it's a mechanism for other components which can be released, can be included with Q or can be external. But these components can influence whether a workload can be admitted. And with that, with this admission check, that's how we implemented the latest integration with Cluster Autoscaler. As you might know, I think it was presented in the working group earlier. Cluster Autoscaler now has this provision and request API that allows to request for multiple resources for multiple pods that look the same in a single in a single call. So we integrated with Cluster Autoscaler provisioning request, and we did it through admission checks. But as I was saying, admission checks can be also external components. I'll give some examples later. Um, the next feature we worked on is pending information about pending workloads. So now in the cluster queue status, you can see the head of the queue. You can configure queue. You can configure this to show you as many elements as you want. I think the limit is 4,000. I don't. It's either 1,000 or 4,000. I can remember at the moment. But that's how much of the head you can see. Um, and we also added metrics for resource usage. Originally, we were worried that this could uh, produce certain burden, like high memory consumption, but we figured it was useful. So for certain scenarios, if you have a limited number of cluster queues, you can benefit from these metrics. Um, of course, resource usage is also present in the cluster queue status, but sometimes metrics are easier to manage and to do dashboards for using the standard Prometheus tools, standard tools that know how to read Prometheus. Um, the next feature is policy to control whether to preempt or borrow. So earlier I was mentioning that Q supports uh, fungibility, meaning that you have this order list of uh, models or availability tiers that you can define, and you can cube it, basically go to the first one. If it doesn't fit, go to the next one, so on and so forth. But while doing this, it can decide to preempt or to borrow. So the new policy allows you to define exactly what to do. If it's possible to preempt, do you want to preempt on this flavor? Or do you want to continue trying to avoid preemption and just try the next flavor? Or maybe you want to borrow if there is another uh, team in this cohort that can borrow, can give, that has free resources that you can borrow. So these two rules, right? If it's possible to preempt or if it's possible to borrow, do you want to borrow or do you want to go to the next flavor? Originally, Q has certain embedded policy, and we made it the default, but now you can change it. The next feature is partial admission, which was originally alpha. We graduated to beta in this release. Um, uh, the next feature is workload priority. Um, Basically, we got some feedback from users that uh, the way we were using priority, the way we were obtaining the priority for jobs was based on the pod priority, defining the pod spec. And in certain scenarios, this is not desirable because you just like users want to influence the order in the queue, but they don't want to influence kube scheduler preemption, which can get in the way of running workloads, especially in autoscale environments. So we simply added a separate workload priority object that's specifically designed to define the priority of jobs, not the pods. And of course, we have backwards compatibility, so you can still use pod priority if you prefer. Um, yes, and with that, we also made priority mutable, so that if you have certain rules you want to change while a job is being queued, you can change the priority of a queued job. Um, we once there was some talk about whether we should have some policies around like mutating priority over time, but we decided to start with just allowing mutable priority so that the community can experiment and get back to us, give us feedback of what's mechanisms of changing priorities might be widely useful, and so that we can bring it back to queue. Um, and finally, uh, the last set of features, which is actually a lot of features, we added new integrations. So originally we only supported MPI job from Kubeflow. Now we support everything like TensorFlow, Paddle, PyTorch. All of the Kubeflow training operator APIs are supported. Um, yes, so we with the framework we use the framework to do these integrations, and we added an additional framework specifically for Kubeflow that allows us to write all these integrations with basically 3 lines of code or something for each of the Kubeflow APIs. So that was pretty cool. And lastly, we also added support for single plane pods. We heard from the users that they would like to use jobs, but sometimes they are not there yet. They but they still want to start using Q. So one of the biggest pain points was that Q didn't support plain pods. So we added support for plain pods, and we're going to be working on groups of pods in the next release to help users migrate to, uh, to allow users to use Q without having to change all of their infrastructure. But of course, we still recommend Job API or other CRDs, specialized CRDs, so that uh, you can have all the benefits of pod management. You don't have to do it yourself. Uh, so yeah, that's all that is new. I'll zoom in a little bit on admission checks and provisioning requests because I think that's the most exciting feature. Uh, but if there are any questions here, I can move on to. No, not hearing anything. So I'll move on to admission checks. With that, just a quick recap of how does the admission work before, like in 0.4. So as a user, you define queues. As an administrator of the cluster, you define queues, and these queues define quota for these resources. So, for example, a queue can have 50 CPUs, 80 T4 GPUs, and 200 gigabytes of RAM available for jobs. So Q would take these quotas in consideration when a job comes in, right? So a new job is created or a new workload is created, and Q simply does a quota check. Do we have enough space? Yes or no? If it doesn't, it will go back to the queue. If it does, um, well, maybe you need preemption, right? Maybe you need to preempt some lower priority jobs. But if it's already enough, then you would just go to quota allocation. And finally, your job can start. So fairly simple. Um, so that's the way it was working before. Now we added this extra step in the middle where now we do the quota checks, possibly with preemption, and then we say that we have reserve quota. So at this point, we can call, uh, actually not call, but just wait for some additional checks that you configure in your cluster queue. And these additional checks would tell queue when they are ready. Once all of these checks have passed, uh, then we actually do the quota allocation, maybe with preemption, and then the workload or the job can run. Now, these checks, they don't have to be in the queue binary, so they can be separate controllers that can do their operations on their own, and then updates the certain API objects uh, to give signal whether they passed or not. Once they pass, Q takes over again and does the rest of the admission. Um, so what kind of things we expect to be admission checks? So I was saying we did provisioning requests. The cluster autoscaler provisioning requests is one of such checks that is included with Q. But what we are envisioning other users to do, maybe you want to implement budgets. You want to connect to your metric system to account for budget usage and use that as an additional check. Or there was another one. Martin, can you, if you're there, what was the other use case? Oh yes, multi-queue, multi-cluster. So another additional check we're thinking of is multi-cluster. But of course, we we are waiting for the community to experiment with this and let us know what is useful. Um, and again, if there is enough feedback about a particular check, we can always consider putting it in the Q official release. But as you can just keep it out of tree if you desire. So that's admission checks. Any questions here? Okay. Um, so next, I wanted to highlight the provisioning requests integration. This was you might have heard about the provisioning request API from Cluster Autoscaler. If not, you can find a link here in the Autoscaler repo. But basically, the API allows to ask the Cluster Autoscaler to provide capacity for a set of pods. And Cluster Autoscaler will confirm whether the capacity can be provided or it can do a scale up. And once it's done with the scale up, it reports back on the status. So with this mechanism, we can ensure that the capacity is there before a job can be started. So essentially, we can implement gang scheduling reliably in an autoscale environment. So yes, so yeah, it strengthens the atomicity of a job to start over, which is a stronger guarantee than just the simple quota checks that we had before. So Q includes a provisioning request controller, which is implemented as an admission check. So this controller would manage the life cycle of the provisioning request CRD. It will create provisioning requests based on your jobs. It will wait for the provisioning request to be fulfilled, and if it's fulfilled, it will start the job. Well, before starting, it will inject certain markers from the cluster autoscaler about where these nodes are, or which provisioning request fulfill this job, so that the job can go into the nodes that were scaled up for this job specifically. And I think that's it. So that's it for 0.5. Again, any questions at this point? Okay. So what is top of mind for us in 0.6 and beyond? Take this with a grain of salt. We still have to discuss with the overall community. We will wait for feedback, and we will wait for contributors as well to come with their own ideas. But we are already thinking of certain features For example, on-demand visibility of pending workloads. As I described in zero point 0.5, we introduce the head. You can now see the head of the queue in the cluster queue status. That is that is fine, but it doesn't allow you to see the position of a workload, of any workload, if it's not in the head. Um, Plus, the status can have some performance implications depending on how many elements you want to see in the status. So we want to introduce on-demand visibility. So basically, an API that connects directly into queue memory. Not directly, but it looks at the information from the cache, um, so that you can more reliably tell where in the queue your workload is, and certain and possibly other stats. Uh, yeah, we are already working on a prototype for this. It's using, I think it's called the API server extensions API. Mm, if Patrick is here, can you correct me?
Yeah, that's right.
Mhm. Yes. So, uh, yeah. So that's pretty cool because we don't have you don't have to set another certificate to connect to queue. You just connect to the API server, and the API server talks to queue um, to provide you with this visibility. Uh, the next thing we want to add is support for groups of plain pods, so that yeah, you can start all these plain pods as a group. um, the next thing we want to do is certain rescuing uh, policies. So this comes from again autoscale environments where you might have, for example, you might have a reservation, or you might have already running nodes. So this is your high availability resources. These are your high availability resources, but you also want to do scale ups for spillover, right? But sometimes the scale ups um, might hit stockouts, so you want to rescue uh, you if these jobs get stuck in a scale up, you want to rescue these jobs if, let's say, your high availability nodes got half quota, right? So yeah, we are working with our users to define the APIs and give the proper knobs for rescuing, uh, the policies for rescuing. The next might be exciting to a lot of people because we've heard this a lot. Hierarchical, well, the request has always been to extend the hierarchy. As you might remember, Q only defines a two-level hierarchy, which works for most scenarios, for most organizations. But there are bigger organizations with multiple teams, multiple users per teams. They want to define fair sharing at all these levels. Um, so we are working on a proposal for hierarchical cohorts that would allow us to define these semantics. And we're also looking into multi-cluster, um, which we already presented, I think, a month ago, maybe a little bit earlier. Um, so we're still collecting feedback on all of these features. Uh, Multi-cluster hierarchical cohorts, in particular, we would like to know, um, yeah, what resonates with you in terms of fairness, what is fair for you, things like that. So that's all I had for today. I think we still have plenty of time for questions if there are any. I I cannot see any icons because I'm presenting, but you can speak up if there are any questions.
Hey, I had a question. So I think you were talking about this, but like seeing the whole queue depth for a queue, like looking at all of the jobs in the backlog, that's something that's kind of that's something that we're looking towards. That's the coming soon kind of thing. I think about like in Slurm, like doing like an SQ, like being able to list the backlog of jobs in like a cluster queue or a local queue, like that sort of concept. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So in 0.5, now you can have this information as part of the status. So you would do kubectl get cluster queue, and you would get this information. And you can configure the depth that you want to record in the static queue configuration.
Oh, is that what you were talking about? About like the the number that the number of depth, the default depth is like 1,000 or something like that, is what you were saying?
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So does it give you the actual?
I think the default is like 10.
Oh yeah.
And
I'm
you can
sorry.
support up to 1,000 or more.
Off by a couple of zeros. So but does that give you like the actual like the list of jobs? Or I thought I remembered seeing it just, and it just said like there are 5 pending jobs, but it gives you the actual like the order starting from like the one that will run next, assuming nothing changes.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay,
Now
cool.
you have the names of the jobs.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
the workload objects. Yes. So, but you can only get the head.
Yeah, gotcha. That's what you were talking about. Okay. I was thinking like, okay, yeah, no, that sounds good. Awesome. Thank you.
And staying.
One comment on the tooling. We are also looking at the options to expand the tooling. Right now, you interact with Q with kubectl commands, so you create YAMLs, but we hear people asking about Slurm-like toolings, where you have a dedicated commands to play with queues and jobs, and hopefully we will be having some better experience for in queue as well.
Oh yeah, awesome. That's good to hear. I think of it as yeah, being able to bridge that gap, right? Somebody coming from a traditional HPC scheduler moving into Kubernetes and Q, like what can we do to make that user experience easier? So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool.
Yeah, we understand that Slurm and other things are based on commands rather than YAMLs and definitions. So it might be a little bit harder for people to get there, and what they're used to is also playing. What they used to do is also playing a big role in their daily schedule. So yeah, we'll try to have something similar in Q. So hopefully soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other question? Okay, so with that, I want to just give a thank you for all the contributors and all the people that provided feedback. This was our biggest release ever, so I'm very proud of what the team accomplished. And there is a few people that were instrumental to this release. I wanted to personally call out Yuki, um, um, Trajan, and Michał were very instrumental in this release. And if you go through the commit history and the review comments, you will see a lot of activity from these folks, and of course other people as well. In this release we got a lot of new contributors, some of which provided very big features. And yeah, and they wrote a KEP. We have a KEP processing queue as well, so they wrote a KEP. They did all the discussions, did the implementation tests, and so on. So very proud of the work that we're accomplishing and the level of maturity that the project has achieved already. So I'm looking forward for more feedback and contributions. Yeah, you can find us in the Slack channel, the working group batch Slack channel anytime. If you have any questions about usage or if you have feedback about features. So with that, I finish my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Aldo. Really awesome to see all the progress that has been made in the project and seeing it grow and seeing more contributors joining the force. So thank you everyone for joining. See you all in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
See you in KubeCon.
Oh yeah.
All right, bye.
Bye.